Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good morning and welcome to the Future Track session. So this is a session that we put together today. It's happening in this room the whole day about future web. And we have focused on three of some of the hottest topics when we talk about what's going to happen next on the web, mainly intelligence, want the web to be smarter, like ubiquity. Well, now we're not sitting at the desktop. We are in a ubiquitous environment. And finally, when we talk about exchanging lots of information, lots of data, come the issues of privacy and also the trust experience. So, as I mentioned, we're going to have all these sessions happening today in this room, which means that you don't even have to wait tomorrow, end of day, to know everything about future web. At the end of the day, you know everything. And we're going to start with the first topic on intelligence. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Harry Sham, one of our Microsoft corporate vice president, and who's been actually by training a researcher, many years in academia with by background working on computer graphics, computer vision. Did you come to the Kinect plenary there? You would have seen, I'm sure you've seen that already. And also, actually, I know at least two things. Apart from all the awards, he's an IEEE fellow, ACM fellow too, for his work actually in computer vision and computer graphics. But I know two things about Harry. I know he talks at least two languages. One, which is the language of research, because he's been a researcher for many, many years here in Redmond, and then in Asia at our lab, Microsoft Research Asia. And the second language is the language of business units and product land. And that's very handy when we talk about turning ideas into reality. So he was a leader actually at MSRA, which positioned him very well to his new role as a corporate vice president in the business unit of Bing and leading search development. Harry?
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much, Evelyn, for your very kind introduction and the invitation. It's really always a great pleasure for me to welcome all those distinguished professors around the world to come to Microsoft. I used to have a very nice job at Microsoft Research, and I see Rico is already smiling. And I was kicked out of Microsoft Research and parachuted at Iraq and started shooting. So it's really nice to be back to MSR and all those events. I'm really very touched by how well people still in MSR still treat me. I came here. I just realized that I need some sugar. I forgot to get my breakfast. Melissa actually gave me some pastry. I just quickly had some. So I hope it give me enough energy to last through this session. So the topic I'm going to talk about today is actually the really very much related to the product that I'm working on, is Bing search engine. I see a lot of professors here, and I really cannot resist but asking, how many of you here actually have ever tried Bing? All right. Oh my goodness, I'm really moved. And how many of you actually set Bing as your default search engine? Oh. Well, when you get home, please give us a try. And I will repeat this. You will get so tired of hearing me saying that. Given that this is a faculty summit, I talked to Evelyn, and she strongly recommended that me give somewhat more research talk. So I tried really hard with great help with two of my distinguished colleagues, Yu Ting, who is the program manager in Bing, and also Dr. Kunzan Wang, who is a researcher here in Microsoft Research, to help me put together all this slide deck. So for all those incredible equations, you should really ask Gunsan. And for all those problems with our product, you should ask Yuting. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit really about what's going on with Bing and with the search engine product. Before that, I really want to somewhat provide a perspective. Before I really talk about what's really new with the product design and the technology behind the scene, how we put all those things together. It's very, very important to have perspective because the overall, the battle on the internet and the battle about the internet search engine is just such an incredibly difficult task. So one interesting fact is that historically, ever since Google happened, ever since Google became a search engine, at least in the United States, no one ever took any share from Google. It was only Google actually taking share from everyone else. So I ignored all those smaller players. If you just look at Microsoft, when we actually started to have our search engine, that's when we started to track our kind of share. Roughly about 5-6 years ago, we started with about 17% of market share. That's where we started. So my joke to the team is actually, by the time I climb back to 17%, maybe I can retire back to MSR. So it actually continued to really kind of dipping until last year when we actually officially launched Bing.com, the new revamped search engine. So this is really what happened in the last 12 months. If you look at that, in the last 12 months, we pretty much grow about 50% of our traffic in terms of share, which we track. They are, by the way, just to be a little bit scientific here, they are a number of third-party companies actually tracking the overall the internet traffic. The company we actually pay most attention is called ComScore. So the numbers here we actually really showing here is actually ComScore number. So if you look at that, Google actually sort of dipped a little bit, about 1.2%. Yahoo actually dipped a little bit, 1.4%. There's some smaller players, so we also took share from them as well. So overall, we actually grew about 4.1%. There's actually interesting things going on, and hopefully, with the Yahoo deal, we signed together. Between us and the Yahoo, we can maintain and grow beyond 30% of US market share. That will give us enough sort of big enough market, not only just from the search engine share point of view, perhaps more importantly from the advertisement point of view. With 30% of the market share from search and most of the advertisers we have between Yahoo and us, we have this opportunity to create a very vibrant the ads market and the auction market, and that hopefully provides a very healthy competition with Google and the other more people actually would like to participate in this joint Yahoo and Microsoft market. There are a couple of other numbers I want to point out is actually, so the unique users after we launched the Bing in the US, the unique users also grew from about 72 million to 92 million in the United States, which is actually a very healthy number, which is roughly about 70-80% of what Google has. So just to put it in perspective. And the market share I already mentioned about, so we grew about 50% of the market share last year. And another very, very interesting thing, which I'm actually going to talk a little bit about in this presentation before I get into the technical details, is actually the brand awareness. Is really Bing as a brand. It's extremely important to realize how difficult it is that once Google became a verb, it's very, very difficult to grab any share out of Google so we can actually gain anything. So we actually came up with this name Bing. I actually really like, and except that translating that into Chinese is very, very difficult. We actually did a good job. We did a fantastic job, in my opinion. Actually, without my help, we still did a good job. And so the thing is actually, my hope is actually when Bing becomes a verb, Bing is sort of becoming a verb. We all know with the internet, we can find everything, anything on the net, and the people become lazy and lazier. So my hope is actually in long term, people cannot type any kind of 6-character word anymore. and everyone will degenerate to a 4-character user, and it's called Bing. So one very important thing really about the brand is so extremely important, and we continue to hear that from our users, especially from those key influentials. One blogger, famous blogger in the US, whom we work very closely with, is actually Danny Sullivan. Danny pretty much makes a yearly trip here to Redmond and talk to us. He actually wrote many articles criticizing Bing, the overall quality, why we don't do this, why we don't do that. The biggest challenge he had, actually he's in the complaint about Microsoft Live Search, before we actually called Bing. There are really two things. One, that he basically said, your CEO is not really that serious about search. So we send Steve Ballmer to his conference, then he's happy, then he doesn't say that anymore. The other thing he said, well, you guys just completely missed it. This is really about branding. It's a consumer product, it's really a brand. So he actually drew this picture, which I really like. He's basically saying, Google is now so powerful, it really becomes a brand. It's almost like a cigarette. So, it wouldn't kill you, but after all, it's actually a cigarette. So the reason I put up this picture here is actually, so I just want to remind all the professors, when you get home, occasionally you still smoke, but when you smoke, you just realize it's actually not very healthy. So please try Bing. I think this is enough joke about the brand and the challenges. I just want to get a little bit of love from everyone for this difficult fight, Bing versus Google. So the interesting thing we have is that after all, it's a consumer product. End of the day, you have to produce a product that is at least as good as Google. In fact, it has to be better than your competitor in some aspects. Otherwise, there's really no reason for other people to switch to your search engine and give it a try. So with that, I want to focus my presentation today, starting from how do we define search quality. To me, as a computer scientist and the software engineer, there are really three aspects overall about search quality. What I usually call the relevance, performance, and the user experience. And the relevance, performance, the experience. So we repeat that every release, every product cycle. We make sure that what do we do. The first one is really relevance. It's really not too much I need to tell you here. Now, people give you a query or give you a set of queries, then eventually you figure out what they're really looking for. You provide the relevant results to them. The second thing is really how quickly you can really provide the results to the user. And the third one is really about the user interface, user experience, why people actually enjoy the overall experience. To me, I would just say, if your product is so much more relevant than anyone else, then the game is over. And clearly, people will use your search engine. If the relevance is more or less equivalent, then you say, well, I can get your results 10 times faster. Then I would just say, also, this game is over. And then everyone will just use yours. The third one is really about how easy it is to really use it. The challenge there for search engine, end of the day, is that people don't really know what to type. People just don't. It's not as simple as natural language interface that like what we usually talk to friends. It's also not that simple as say, well, why don't you just have a couple of keywords? You don't really know how search engine really works, whether those keywords hit to certain corpus of the index, eventually give you the results. So all those three things are really the most important. And pretty much, in the last 10, 15 years of internet search engine developments, more or less, I would just say, those search engines that won the battles, in different stages, the latest one being Google, is really focused on those three things. In terms of relevance, Google started with a very big corpus. Eventually, they get a lot of long-tail queries. And they had a lot of huge focus on the overall speed. Then they get things really, really fast, starting from the very lightweight HTML page. And also the ease of use is just say, why don't we have a very simple and elegant 10-blue link interface, and the people understand, the user's mind is very clear, say, well, if I see 10 results, top to bottom, more or less it's very clear. The top one actually means it's more relevant. So that's pretty much what happens to search engine until maybe a couple of years ago, I would say. We also clearly see the shift overall in the last few years in particular, that people are becoming less and less satisfied with the results they actually got returned from the search engine. And again, I would just say in those three areas. When you really talk about the relevance, whether you get the relevant result, it's no longer just hitting those keywords. It's more and more about, did the search engine really get the meaning and the concept beyond the keywords? What's really going on? In terms of speed, it's not just say, you go to this white box, you type a few queries, you hit the return, boom, how quickly you actually get the results back, maybe 10 blue links. More and more people actually spend a long time to look at a long session about planning a trip to Hawaii or do some other interesting shopping decisions. And it's actually a long session. So the problem actually becoming really finishing, completing the task by multiple sessions, and hopefully with fewer clicks. And the last one is really about ease of use. End of the day, you have to think about how can we simplify the task, engage with the user, and understand what the user is asking for. Hopefully simplify the task by aggregating the information and classify the information and provide a lot of search support ads to help facilitate the task completion and simplify the task. I think with that, I'm going to pause here and invite my colleague Yuting to show you the latest demos and from the release we just completed about a few weeks ago. For those of you who are interested in Microsoft product development process here, at Bing, we actually run roughly 6 months release. Every 6 months, we actually roll out a major release packed with a lot of user-facing features. So I'm going to invite Yuting to show you some demos. Yuting.
Thanks, Harry. Good morning. It's great to be here and have the opportunity to share with you some of the exciting features we just recently released a couple weeks ago at Bing. As Harry mentioned earlier, that a lot of our investment at Bing are actually on improving search quality. By really understanding user intent, and then we are able to organize and provide better results to actually help people complete their task easier and faster. So I will start with one of our most popular and most copied feature at Bing, which is our homepage. Actually, let me switch to my demo machine here. So here's when you type www.bing.com, and we're showing a beautiful homepage like today. The sun's a corona as the background image, and then if you are actually curious about what was the image that we had yesterday, there's actually a little bottom on the lower the lower right corner that you can actually access some of the previous images that we have. We come back here, and then some of that is you actually mouse over some of the search verticals. We actually also provide some of the common tasks of the search vertical. For example, image, that we found that a lot of people actually are using image search to find the desktop wallpaper for their computer. And then we actually put in here to actually make it easier for user to actually, just with one click, they can complete the task. So that's our homepage. And the next one I want to show is just if you type World Cup, which just completed yesterday, as you can see that if you search World Cup, and by the way, this is actually a live connection. I'm just sort of kind of typing it first, so it's just easier for me to demo, but you can give it a try after the session. So World Cup, and you can see that as soon as we type World Cup, and then the results that we're seeing, some of the latest news about World Cup, which it's already done and Spain won 1-0 yesterday, and so you can see the news answer over here, and then we have a very good World Cup answer that actually provides the results of the last 2 games over here. And then on the left-hand side, you can see that we have a related search where we already have a Spain wins World Cup as one of the suggested queries, which is actually a huge improvement from our previous release, where we are able to mine our data in near real time and actually provide a suggested query on the left rail, just like since yesterday. And And as you can see that down here, some of the results over here are the algo results. You can see a label here 3 hours ago. That's also one of our new features. Is actually we call it fresh results, where the algo results are actually the freshness of the algo results are considered in a kind of as part of the ranking. So that's a workup. Then if you want the next one is the Octopus, which is actually pretty famous during workup. So that and here's if you actually search Bing today, you find out that there's also latest news about the Octopus, and he's going to retire. And then you look at the related search. There's also a number of related search queries that actually kind of related to workup and the Octopus. Again, if you scroll down, we also have lots of the fresh results coming out of the algo results, which also talks about the Octopus is going to retire. So that's some of the exciting features that we have on our main search page. And it's I'm a Mariner fan, and I'm actually want to look at kind of what's going on with Mariners. So if come to Bing, you type Mariners, and we have an answer which will provide the schedule of the Mariners games for the next few days. You can see. And then one of the other things you can do is I'm actually curious about what's, what are the kind of how does it compare between Mariners and Yankees in terms of their, current results. And so one of the things I can do is I can just type a query Mariners versus Yankees. And in this way, we actually provide a beautiful enhanced result where we actually list the stats between Mariners and Yankees in terms of different type of stats between the two teams. So that's also one of the new features we have. We call it compare feature on that. And then on the left rail, you can see you can also compare with a number of different other teams as well. So that's a very interesting feature for lots of sports fans. And I'm a fan of Ichiro Suzuki. So again, it's the same when I type Ichiro Suzuki, we actually provide an enhanced result for Ichiro in terms of some of his stats in the last few games. And then down here, you can see there's actually a compare. Again, it's similar to the compare features I was just talking about, but that one I actually type the query directly, and then we actually understand the intent of compare. For this particular one, we actually think that user also may have interest, but by actually looking at some of the stats that compare Ichiro with some of the players. So for example, if I say I'm interested in comparing Ichiro with Derek Jeter, and then if you click on that, and it will actually give you the results and comparing the two players in terms of their stats to date. Okay. I'm going to skip the next two ones here. Okay, so the other thing that we actually had a lot of improvement over this current release is actually our news search vertical. We did a lot of work in terms of kind of improve the user experience based on a lot of user feedback, a lot of user interactions with the services. And what we found is one of the things that the new features here is actually, if you see that this is actually a tabbed browsing of today's top news, and this way we actually enable users to easily to switch between different top stories of the day, and that's just make it the navigation of the top news just a lot easier. And the other improvement that we did is actually over our previous releases that now we actually have city level local weather as well as local news on the right rail. So this is also a big improvement. Before we could only do a state level, and now we are able to actually customize into the city level. And the other thing is we also hear a customer's feedback that our customers are actually telling us that they really would like to, especially a lot of news junkies, they would like to actually read much more news on the same page, even without scrolling. So we also try to actually kind of get into more news over here in the panel over here, and then in our previous release we actually only had one column news content, and now we have two columns in the main section, which is enable users to be able to browse more news on the same page without having to click through. So that's some of the improvement that we have on news. And the other one we had, the new features we had released for news is actually when you type a query in the news vertical. In this example that I type Tour de France, one of the things that we added is actually on. If you look at down over here, you see Lance Armstrong. So this one we are able to actually extract the quotes from some of the news articles related to this query, and then actually extract the entity, who in this case is Lance Armstrong, And then we actually listed this here as a kind of people in the news. Basically, it's the people who had quote related to this particular search query on that. And so if you click through, you're going to see an article that has this quote over here. And the other thing is actually sort of in order to help users to navigate the freshness better, we also added a new module on the right rail here. And here is actually kind of list the latest stories about, again, it's actually related to this query. And you can see some of these are actually very fresh. It's like a couple minutes ago, it just coming to our index. And so that's also a lot of the infrastructure backend work were invested to make actually this possible. And the next one is, so there's lots of news about LeBron James these days, about the decision he makes. And he eventually, I think for those who are tracking this, he eventually decided to go to Miami. And so one of the things that we actually have invested a lot is actually social network, like real-time search or social network search, because as we all know, that a lot of internet activities are now gradually and kind of more and more, not just the topical internet, but it's also all these social networks. So one of the things that we've been working with Twitter, with Facebook, is actually getting their firehose and data and actually make it possible for people to search the popular updates as well as the kind of share links that people share in Twitter and as well as in Facebook. And so in this particular case, that if I type of LeBron James, and you can see that some of the results here are the public updates for LeBron James from Facebook, and in this particular case, it's all from Facebook, but some of that will be from Twitter. And if I click on here, Twitter, you can see, they're going to change to, we have a filter here, you can only see the Twitter, and you can see the new stuff just come in. And then the other thing is, just one thing worth mentioning is that we are the only partner with Facebook that actually received a full firehose from Facebook. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Okay, the next one is, so we know a lot of people are using internet to research when they're buying a new car or they're buying a used car or just doing research. And so one of the things we realize is that in order to help a user to complete a task easier, in the past we always have to do, all right, I'm interested in buying a Honda Accord. I want to look at how it looks like. I have to type a Honda Accord. Maybe I have to type spec. I have to type, I'm looking for prices. I'm looking for reviews, and you kind of have to do kind of multiple queries. So we realize that in order to actually help user, we try to organize things together to make it easier for user to accomplish the task faster and easier. So if you type Honda Accord, and then you're going to see is we call it enhanced results, where we have some of the spec information, and there's also some other more additional information. We kind of pull that all together in one place. And for example, if you say, hey, I'm interested in the spec of a Honda 2010 Honda Accord, if you look at it, you click through, and you're going to see the spec, the detailed spec of a Honda Accord. And then if you are interested, you can say, hey, I want to see how the review looks like. And you're going to see a lot of reviews that we work with a lot of content partners to make sure that it's in our index, and we kind of present to user in a very organized way on that. So that's another one. Let me just search this one. Okay, so the other thing is also, again, is similar to the Honda Accord example, that so a lot of times when people are doing traveling, the first thing they're going to do is actually check out, the destination city and kind of see if there's anything going on, buying the tickets or checking out the weather. Again, it's the same, like we realize that that's a lot of people do in multiple steps, and we try to actually bring that all together and organize in a very organized way to help users to accomplish the task easier. So in this particular example, let's say I'm going to Chicago next week, and I'm just simply type of Chicago, and we present these enhanced results. And again, it's telling me the current weather in Chicago. I can even print out a map of Chicago, and then here's this even 5 deals from Seattle. It actually knows the bin knows where I am right now in Seattle, and kind of from Seattle to Chicago, and then also some of the attractions. So if I click through, I can get additional more information on that. And then if you look at this here, on top of here, this we actually call quick tabs. So quick tabs actually, the intention of quick tabs is to actually provide easier access for users to access the special search results that we have. In this example, we think the intent is most likely to be traveling, so we figure that users must be interested in looking at maps, must be interested in check out weather, and probably want to know what's going on in the city. So if you look at here and say, hey, I just want to know what's going on in Chicago, we bring up, you click on that, we bring out the results where we have all the events that's going on in Chicago, and we have different filters in terms of kind of the time and in terms of different type of categories where you can actually find the events that you are interested in. Okay. All right, the next thing is music. A lot of people actually search for music information. It could be the songs, it could be lyrics, it could be just the band information. And again, we're putting all these together. If you type Bryan Adams, that's my fan, even though marketing tells me that I should do Lady Gaga. But I just can't simply feel Lady Gaga it's my thing. So I decided to swap it out with Bryan Adams. So if you type what Bryan Adams, what we show you, again, it's actually very organized results where we give you a bunch of information about Bryan Adams, his official site, and then his songs and album information, and some of the upcoming events that he's having in the next few months. And that's I'm interested in, again, it's actually cool. It's like actually mind reading. Like I really love everything I do. And then we work with the Zoom that we actually provide, there are over 5 million songs that our users can just listen right there without actually even having to purchase. It's all free. So give us a try. It's free. So, okay. So yeah. And then of course when I'm listening to that, if I'm actually interested in lyrics, I can print out the lyrics of the song. Okay, that's music. And then there's YouTube, there's Lady Gaga, if you can try. Okay, and I'm gonna skip this. Okay, the other thing is games. We know a lot of people are gamers, right? And probably people like me, it's one of my hardcore gamers. We focus on Halo and World of Warcraft, this type of games. But there's also lots of people, probably a much bigger crowd that actually likes casual games. So we by doing our query logs, we also realized, wow, that's actually a lot of people are doing game searches in terms of the cheats, the walkthroughs, the reviews, even just trying to locate where the games they can play online, particularly in the case of casual games. We also work with a lot of content providers and index the right content and put them together. And we have over 35,000 hardcore games in our index, as well as actually over a few hundred kind of playable casual games in our index where we can provide users the ability to play right in line, so which I'm going to demonstrate to you. So that's I'm interested in finding some information about Halo 3. And then again, you type this query here, will bring up a enhanced result that has videos, heavy reviews, and then if I click through this, we also present even more detailed information about Halo 3 in terms of if you look at the left filter here, we have cheats, we have walkthroughs, and you can kind of go through a number of different things here. And then the other thing is if you say, hey, I'm interested in some of the casual games, right? This is actually one of the top casual games, Bejeweled. So in this case, you type Bejeweled, and we actually bring up this game right here, and as a top result, and you can even play the game just right in line here directly. And we have hundreds of them in our index. Okay, so that's one I can't see this from here. Okay, so that's games. So another thing I just talked about is the music and games, and we actually have lots of TV shows as well. So in terms of that, we actually realize that entertainment is actually a huge query segment that where lots of our users are performing lots of entertainment-related queries. So we actually, again, in the spirit of actually, organizing things together, make it easier for users to accomplish the task in these ways, like their needs for entertainment. We put together as part of actually a main focus of this release is actually we put together an entertainment hub where we sort of use some of the navigation and browsing capabilities to actually help users to find and search for their entertainment needs, so be it music or movies or games or video games. So that's the, oops, sorry, I jumped too fast. Okay, so that's sort of complete my demo. And actually there's one additional demo that Harry insists to do it himself. So which I'm going to hand it over to Harry.
Why don't you just click that and click that. So I come back to comment on all the entertainment stuff. The thing I actually like is actually all this kind of mathematical, all scientific stuff. We actually realized that a lot of queries that has some kind of computational nature that the current search engines just cannot really do it. There are a lot of interesting things that the people outside the search engine companies have already figured out, very interesting things that we can incorporate, have a blended search experience, things like what Wolfram Alpha can do with mathematics. So here is actually one very interesting query that actually I actually tried on Bing on the New Year's Day 2010 when my son is 8th grader, actually 9th grader, working on his algebra So the one question is really about factorize 2010. It turns out that if you type factorize 2010 and you go to any search engine, pretty much you don't really get the right result. But since we actually understand this math query, we pretty much understand that Wolfram Alpha can give you the right result. We have a business deal with Wolfram Alpha. We click that, and it will bring you to this instant that. For sure, you could go to Wolfram Alpha, type more things, and I continue to learn some very interesting tricks there. But more and more, we should think about it is actually for consumers. It's really about one particular place you go for all kind of information that you actually have one particular website or search engine. You actually get your results. Just for the fun of it, this is the results, and Google even give you some beautiful images about the factorize 2010. So it just shows that I think there's still a long way to go. Many people believe actually the current search engines are already doing a good job. My view is actually far from that. I think understand the meaning and the concept of the queries. I don't think we're really there yet. So are we done pretty much with the demos? Yeah. So thanks, Yuting. It's really, really great. Thank you. I want to make a very quick comment why we actually, for the last release, focused so much energy on the entertainment side. For sure, there are a lot of queries, somewhat entertainment related. The other thing is actually we really take a very much consumer kind of approach. Really think about that Bing is cool, and come up with this redesigned the home page and all those the result page. So we recently actually was invited by Steve Jobs to show the Bing demo at the Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. It's kind of very interesting feeling that actually we show off Bing results on the Safari and all kind of Apple stuff there. Maybe someday people might even think Bing is cooler than Apple. It's for sure it should be cooler than Google. But so I think that's enough demo. So let me just get to really the part I actually really want to talk about today. Is really I want to talk about the Bing Dialog model and the overall how the search engine should be designed to interface with the consumers. I already said a little earlier, saying the search engine really about the three things: relevance, performance, and user experience. There is so much goodness about simple, elegant layout of all the 10 search results. 10 blue links, what we usually call. It's very, very simple, straightforward. People get it. People completely get it. The top one supposedly give me the most likely result. But I would also say the world is really changing. I think people actually expect more and more. Really depends on what kind of queries you have. Take a query like Seattle. There's just so much ambiguity there. When people type a query like Seattle, what do you really know? What can we really provide to the users? So I think there is so much about the product design and the interaction model, how we want to come up with the right product design and use the screen space wisely. And of course, thinking about different form factors as well, from the mobile, different screen sizes, and what we can do. I think Yuting showed you some very similar demos about this, like Chicago. So if you look at basically a query like this, you say, well, what's really interesting about Seattle? For someone to type a query like Seattle, what is he or she thinking? Probably traveling, probably some kind of the traffic information there and the map information there, attraction and the events, all those things. Certainly, if you really want to study Seattle, there's this beautiful, nice Wikipedia page. It still is the #1 algo result right here. If you want, you can really get that. So that's really how we have been thinking about it, especially in the last 18 months, I would say, for the Bing development team. We have been really thinking about what's really beyond 10 blue links, and we come up with a number of design decisions that I will dive into and explain to you. And we work very closely with the marketing team and come up with what is the right way to explain to the consumers what's going on with the 10 blue links. So I'm going to show you a couple of very interesting commercials.
Nunca me llevas a ningún lado.
Ya lo sé. Estoy intentando. Pero los links.
Filomena, yo tengo Bing. Bing Prince of Persia. Una película de acción fantástica y la tienen a las 7 aquí cerca. ¡Vamos!
¡No! ¡Los
Stop searching, start deciding with Bing, the decision engine from Microsoft.
Si tú verdaderamente me amaras, tú me llevarías a un lugar bonito.
Ay, mi amor, los links. Filomena,
Juan Carlos,
mi amor original.
sirvienta.
Isabela, yo tengo Bing.
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 ¿Ven otra vez?
Price Predictor dice que es buen momento para volar.
Price Predictor. Fort Lauderdale.
Florida.
Muy caliente.
Adiós, Juan Carlos.
No, por favor. No, Filomena. No me dejéis solo. Con los links. No. Los links.
Stop searching, start deciding with Bing, the decision.
Maybe someday I will join the marketing team. Yeah. So with all this, exciting, all these commercials, really what I want to talk about is really this particular slide, what we call the evolution of search technology, or what we sometimes also call the search paradigm shift. The more and more what we have been seeing, the trend is moving more from the previously looking at only the 10 blue links, the web results, to more and more the whole page, the results, what we can present there, and to the whole session, and not even just the one page, but a set of pages really satisfy what the user is looking for. I think the second thing we're seeing is actually from the understanding query previously, whether we actually get the speller right, whether we can segment the query right, but more and more about understanding the user intent in the sense of what is the meaning of this phrase, what is the concept behind the phrase. In general, actually, if you look at all the queries that people type, typically it's really more like single concept queries. The more and more, of course, people get more sophisticated as they use the search engine. They might start to type multiple concepts. But understanding user intent is replacing understanding just as a query. If you really put that mathematically, how you formulate this problem, with 10 blue links, the previous problem is really about minimizing the time of the query and the URL matching. So that is really what the problem really is. It goes back to one of the three things I talked about, the performance. Now we actually would like to think about the search problem becoming the minimizing the efforts, which approximately you could think about the time of completing that. So the minimizing the efforts to completing the tasks in the user's mind. The challenge there, of course, is what is the task that the user has in her mind with a single query or even with a set of the queries. So that is the problem, is a research problem and is a product problem that we need to really tackle. But overall, if we think about, we go from the traditional search, what I call the hit or miss model, to this new Bing Dialog model. What we are going to see is really this kind of evolution that eventually we really want to organize the web for the tasks that the users have in their minds. So that is really the key I want to hopefully can convey with the following slides. And certainly we could even draw an architecture and the diagram here, how we really formulate those things. There are really three things that are very, very important. It's really the intent, interaction, and the knowledge. So if you look at that, you say, well, you have to design a product such that you understand that when users come in and they type something, they click something, and the product is designed in a way that the user behavior should be somewhat expected in a way. But we all know, everyone is different. He or she might click differently. So we actually just observe and monitor what's going on with the user and compare with the expected behavior coming with the product design. Feed that into the kind of intent model, which is really the key. So the intent model eventually drive get this new intent IT and drive this interaction model. With the interaction model, we present the search result page, the next search result page, and the user will interact and eventually feedback again. So overall, there's a really one particular big feedback loop here with user intent and user interaction. There's really another loop here that is also very important for this particular Bing Dialog model that is really it's stateful feedback system. There's another feedback loop here is really the intent model and the knowledge repository. So between the intent model, what we understand about this, and we would like to write that into the short-term memory and the long-term knowledge repository. At the time you invoke the intent model, the knowledge we already stored there, typically for long-term, and the short-term memory that we just tracked, likely with the last session that the user interacted with. We take those things and we derive the existing user intent that will guide how we actually come up with that particular page. So if you really put that mathematically, we say, well, they are really, this particular Bayesian framework, and we can come up with the intent model and the interaction model separately. Or you could even make it even more complex and put those things together. But the intent model is try to maximize what is the potential intent here, given the previous intent and knowledge and the user just interact, and the delta between the user interaction and the expected behavior. Then the interaction model is really trying to say, well, what is the cost eventually, such that the user's action will guide, get what the user is really looking for. Then you can go through all those interesting mathematical problems and try to solve those things and theoretically. But in practice, we don't have complete information. In practice, we have to really think about, with the intent, with the knowledge, we have to really think about what are the interaction modes, what are those specific and the concrete dialogue modes that we can provide to the users. So here I actually show 4 specific dialogue modes at the query level, document level, spatial level, and the spatial temporal level. So I'm going to use some examples to explain to you how we actually design the product and interact with the users. And I'm going to also use this query level dialogue to sort of dive in exactly what we actually mean with those 2 big equations there, with those 2 models, Bayesian models there, the intent model and also the interaction model. So at the query level, specifically when I'm going to show you something what we call the autosuggest, you basically type a few characters or type a character, then we actually suggest to you, most likely this is actually what you are looking for. So that is actually the so-called the query level dialogue. So we have done a lot of very interesting things in this particular feature called autosuggest. And if you go try Bing, and we actually would typically keep your history, for example. So you have previously already typed a few queries. Now if you type the latest query, and we also would suggest probably you would like to type something that you previously just typed not just moments ago. So in that case, at the query level dialogue, what we really mean is actually the user action that we observed is really the keystrokes that what you have already typed. And then we basically plug this whole in and solve those 2 equations and eventually get what is the most likely the suggestion that we can provide to you right after this particular stroke that you have typed. So let me show you a couple of examples that you have already seen, that you can already see from the product right now. So this is really what I meant by autosuggest. For those of you actually with Chinese, Japanese, Korean experience typing using Microsoft Word, it's really nothing new here. It's something called IME. It's input method. It's really helping you to finish typing what you have in your mind. It was particularly important for East Asian languages because of the difficulty of typing compared to all those Roman characters. So that is actually what we mean. So if you type loss A, so those are suggestions. So why do we have those suggestions? Because we have a lot of query logs that people actually would like to type. So that is actually a starting point. A lot more things we can add there to really facilitate this task of completing this particular query for you, this specific user. So this is actually the Autosuggest. So then we also have different ways to really look at, if you type one particular query here, most likely you typed it wrong. You typed not Los Angeles, actually Los Angeles. And we just say, well, we actually believe you probably meant Los Angeles. We therefore show you the result pretty much is Los Angeles. If you think we are wrong, we actually have one line at the top of that basically saying we are including the results for Los Angeles. Did you want the results only for Los Angeles? So that gives you a dialog here and that give you a chance to change this thing. So there are different ways you can really play that. You say, well, how did you know, so strongly that actually this is what the user is looking for? Well, we really don't know. We really don't know. We have a probabilistic model behind the scene. For some of those queries, we're actually using a different kind of design called split pane here. You type ebony. Well, it probably means both things. It could really mean ebony or it could mean ebony. Once again, the probability was learned. So that's actually why we come up with this. So I'm going to invite Dr. Kun Sawan to come up here to show you, some latest structure query composition thing. And that, hopefully, we are going to incorporate that in our product very soon. Kun-san.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry. Harry already touched about the Autosuggest. So if you remember the Bing Dialog model, the key point here is to understand user's intent and to minimize the efforts for you to get what you want. And we look at the query log. A lot of time, Harry also mentioned that actually users spend a lot of time just to refine their queries simply because the system cannot get it. And so if you are just like me, you find that a lot of time you actually have to tweak your keywords a lot just to get it right. And so how do we minimize the efforts for you to compose the query? And today, so here we are going to show you some of the research work that we're doing to enhance the Autosuggest to graduate it from the lexical level of a suggestion to semantic level. So hopefully that we can actually minimize the ambiguities and confusions in the process of composing the query. So give an example. Harry already talked about example like Seattle. Search a city. There are so many things you can probably want. But how about another query that Yuting also talked about is Chicago. Well, if you look at this Autosuggest, you see that mostly Chicago here is dominated by one interpretation of this word. It's all about Chicago as a city. But what if, and so if you go there, then you have to, if you want the other sense, like what I am actually a fan of the band called Chicago, you probably won't get anything here, and then though you have to go back and forth with the search engine to launch a lengthy dialogue just to express your intent that you actually want to change the meaning of Chicago. So what we are experimenting here, you are actually literally seeing a usability experimental panel here. We are experimenting something that we introduce here is to engage the user in a dialogue to annotate the sense, what they mean. So it's kind of doing word sense disambiguation right here on the fly. And the thing we introduce is that you can actually type a left parenthesis. Here you see the Autosuggest actually switch to a semantic category. The multiple senses that can use for Chicago. And for me, I can say, well, actually, I'm actually looking for the band and select the band. Here you see the Autosuggest completely changes from the dominant interpretation of Chicago as a city to now a band. And so you can search for bibliography and lyrics and music, etc. And then from there, you can actually disambiguate the query before the search engine actually hits the search engine. So this is one of the examples that we can engage the user to disambiguate right there and actually prevent the ambiguity even from happening. We can actually extend the idea to a longer query. As Harry mentioned, a lot of the time when you try to complete a task, there are a lot of parameters you want to specify, And typically today, you have to go through many steps to get it right. And so what we're thinking, and if we take the IME example that Harry talked about, we can actually incorporate all those semantic suggestions into the while you're typing. So for example, I'm just checking out the flight to go down San Francisco tomorrow. You can actually say, well, how many information you need to search your flight? Well, it's probably you want to specify where do you want to, or you want to, what's your originating city, where's your destination city, etc., and when do you want to fly? So you can do this same thing, and searching the airport, and you can type something, search it, and realize that we actually do the semantic inference based on the task, and so we can actually populate all the possible airport's name and city name, all the semantic objects related to complete the task right here as you type. So a lot of time, you probably don't know how to specify to the original cities from or originating. Here we actually get all the keywords for you. So guide you through in composing the queries. And here I'm just showing that you can actually search the query not just in the lexical form, but also in the semantic form that typically we are very used to through the graphical user interface. And here, so you can actually compute the long queries, and right here on the query. Today's search engine, if you type such a long query, the search engine is going to fail. But this interface, because we are already engaging the user to disambiguate semantic meaning, so this would produce a specially annotated query to the backend. And as a result of that, we can actually take you directly to the search result. That gives you a search page like this. Typically, using today, even Bing, it takes like 5 to 7 steps if everything goes right to reach this page. Whereas this is semantic auto-suggestion, we hope that we can actually reduce all these efforts that take you directly here in one step. So that's my quick spiel. Thank you.
Thank you, Kun-san. Yeah, we're very excited about the technologies now coming out of MSR. We continue to really incorporate as quickly as we could those advanced technology into the product design. We just need to go through usability studies and understand the overall UX impact when we take this kind of technology there. If I may move on to the second mode that actually I introduced to you, that from the query level dialog to the document level dialog. So when you take a look at what's really going on with a page like this, and you may or may not find that is actually a lot of information there. It's actually could be clean for some people, could be cluttered for others. So if you really look at that, there's some deep thinking behind how we actually put together this particular page. In particular, I would just say the way we look at that is really going from the left to right and from the top to bottom. Let me just mostly take from the top to bottom and how we actually design the page as a dialogue. And if you look at that, you really have to take a look at, you have actually before we talk about title here, if you look at the overall, the document level thing, is you have this title and for each of the page, and you have this page time. You say, well, when this page was actually changed, and you have this caption. It's 2 or 3 lines of snippet here, quickly telling you what's really going on. And we also have something very unique for Bing is actually we call it the hover preview. It's really additional captions. Think about that. We have even longer captions. Think about it just like when we submit the papers to conferences, you not only have the abstract, you also have extended abstract nowadays. So then you also have this deep links. Deep links really means that those links in this particular website, possibly with those really the caption titles there. And you also have the URL where this thing is coming from. And also we have another feature most people don't really know is actually what we call the Wikipedia on Bing is kind of reformulate the Bing page, reformulate Wikipedia page on Bing by highlighting a few very important things that the Wikipedia pages can provide to us, like pictures and the maps. So those things are really, a lot of very interesting thing there. But with this document thing, that really comes to something very, very interesting about the spatial dialogue. So as I mentioned to you, this whole page design, you go from the left to the right, and you go from the top to the bottom. And the people look at the page, then they somehow look for something they are interested. If you think about that, on Bing, the left rail, a year ago when we launched Bing, and we sort of took a really bold step by coming up with this left rail. Because before that, people were really worried about using the left rail space. There's this mystery about the golden triangle at the very top left corner. That's where typically the eyeball movement, user attention, focused at. It turns out that in our research we found that the golden triangle is actually shiftable, can be shifted. So by showing this interesting requery type of thing here on the left hand, and we help the users to come up with something very, very interesting. And on the right-hand side, for now, is mostly ads. But overall, what I really want to talk about here is actually how we design and think about the main line in the middle. So at the very top, if you look at that, you see this thing called the scope bar or top hat. And all those things, all those Bing vertical surfaces there is web, image, video, shopping, news, and all those things. If you want to go directly into those verticals, you could easily by clicking that. Then the other thing is, the second thing is actually right below the search box is something very new for Bing. So I really want to emphasize that. And we just released it a few weeks ago. So it's really something about, I would call it query dependent understanding of where we actually want to provide information to the users. In some way, you could even think about the first box at the very top is query independent. Whatever query you have, you click that, get you to that vertical, you do a search, like shopping. But for this one here, is if you type a query like a book of Eli, we actually tell you that it's actually not a book. It's actually more like a movie. So then you actually see, well, it's a movie that actually has showtime. The web, showtimes, news, and the Wikipedia showing you, what's really interesting about this particular movie. So that's actually how we show that. And another thing I really want to point out is also this latest innovation from Bing about really summarizing what's going on with our top results. So I talked about at the very top, that is all kind of Bing verticals. And I talked about query dependent kind of understanding of what's going on, what we call the quick tabs. Then I will take a look at what's really going on for the first 10 to 40 results. Then we summarize all those things. They might have some reviews. They might have something talking about the cast. And there's also something about where you can buy or rent stuff. All those links here actually summarized from the search result. It's not about any separate corpus where you get something very different. It's really about the summarization of the search result returned for this particular query. So this way you can think about really this spatial dialogue here give you these three levels. Query independent level, query dependent level, and also summarization of what's going on the SERP and the search result page. So the last one I want to quickly talk about is really this spatial temporal thing. So I mentioned a couple of times when we design this product, we really have to think about not just the one particular page. It's really about the whole session. It really means that after the user types one query, the next time the new query coming in, it most likely has something to do with the previous query. It's really hard to predict a long history, but I think the short-term memory, it works pretty well. So I show you a couple of examples that is kind of fun. So suppose that you type the query called Toyota, and it will give you this beautiful results, Toyota cars and all those things. I don't know why we don't have recalls, but I think that's okay. So next time if I type probably Camry, if I type CAM, so we understand that you just typed Toyota. So at this time, we would like to suggest to you, probably you mean Toyota Camry. If that is the case, you click Toyota Camry from the Autosuggest, most likely you will get much better results. So another example here, if you type camelotethylene, and you type this here, and then the next time if you type JSON kit, and we would like to supply a new feature here called compare. So if you type those different NBA players, you might be interested in comparing those people. So the last example I'm showing you here is actually if you type the Honda Civic, and now you type Toyota Prius. Now we actually show you here, and there's another suggestion here is actually Honda Civic versus Toyota Prius. So we have different ways to surface potential actions, potentially what user is looking for in different ways, in different part of the page. Some are more explicit, some are more subtle. Nevertheless, we try to guess what the user is looking for, and using the spatial temporal dialog, subtly, hopefully, suggest to the user that that might be the task you are looking for. So let me summarize my talk by going back to this key slide, saying we are seeing this evolution of the search technology development product, and so we go from this search hit or miss model to the Bing dialog model. There are really three important things there. One is actually going beyond the temporal links to the whole page and the whole session relevance. And there's this understanding query to understand the meaning, concept, and the intent. Then it's mathematically, we formulated the problem from minimizing the time of URL and the query matching. So we go beyond just the hundreds of milliseconds matching. We really go to minutes, if not hours, the level of minimizing the efforts of completing the tasks the user are looking for. Essentially, what we are trying to do is really try to organize the web for tasks. And there are a lot of challenges there, technology challenges, business challenges, branding challenges there. But those key talking points I hope I was able to convey to you is really about user intent, user interaction, and the knowledge. And we need to put together and under this framework, and we try to solve that using this Bing dialog model is really based in the framework, and we can solve that. But there's really a lot of challenges there. That's basically what I want to talk today. But before I finish that, I do want to take advantage of this opportunity to just say a few words about the collaboration between Bing and the academia. First of all, let me say I really appreciate MSR has done so much to help the product team to reach out to the academia, to the academic community. So we had this great opportunity to collaborate with MSR to supply the web ngram services. As far as I'm aware, it has been a huge success. A lot of people have been using the ngram that we provide for their research, and we would love to continue to supply that. I understand that there's this SIG IR workshop in July this month. I look forward to seeing a lot of more exciting stuff from that workshop. And the new API services and the query data there, you can really, starting today, you can go to the website, get more information there. I'm also very excited to announce that we are putting together this first Bing MSR challenge, hopefully sometime in this fall. So I'd like to encourage you and your students, your colleagues, to participate in that. And what we really want is, again, share more data with the research community, academia community, where we tackle jointly those very challenging problems, the problems like speller and the query alteration and all those things, and some things very much related to what Dr. Kun-san Wang talked about. It's just so much more that we can do together. I really appreciate all your support to Microsoft. I would appreciate even more if you show more love to Bing, and when you get home, and make sure that one of your home computers sets Bing as a default, if not all of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Harry, Yuti, and Kwan-san. Please, if you have questions, we have about 10 minutes for questions. Wait until somebody comes to you with a mic. In the meantime, I have a question for the three of you. So will you be featured in Los Links episodio 3? Okay, I think we have the mic
I think the
somewhere
Kwan-san
now.
looks really good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the excellent demo and explanation. I'm just curious that currently how much really we understand the user intent when they type the queries. Maybe it's top secret or something, but I was wondering how much we can really understand.
Well, this is really a tough question. How much we really understand? I don't think I can give you a percentage, for example. I would just say we understand a little, I would say at this point. And then you look at all those results. And one way to really answer your question probably is actually looking at some marketing data. So we did a lot of marketing data. So we basically ask the question sort of approximation to what you're asking. We just say, how many queries nowadays you get from any search engine? Actually, the results you are satisfied. And the people typically say about half nowadays. They say roughly about half of the queries, the results they actually found. My understanding is they're basically saying on the first page, they more or less find the link. Eventually, they get to the place they're looking for the information there. But once you ask those people one step further, and it turns out that those 50% they are satisfied, they are not really that satisfied. They just really don't know what more they can expect. I think that is our job to eventually educate the people, what more they can expect. And a good demo by Kun-san really illustrate that. When you type a query Chicago, what more do you need to decipher the intent?
I see. So this morning, actually, I see excellent demo like a Connect. So probably currently all search engines usually just get the keywords, but probably we can get more than just the keyword. For example, my face, my mood, the time. Do you have any thoughts to extend like getting intent from something else besides keyword?
Yeah, I think what you suggested is probably a little bit in the future, but I would just say context is very, very important. I'd like to use the mobile search as an example. And when you do mobile search, and you already have the location and other things, and anything associated with this particular phone, and all that particular mobile device. So we actually do all the relevance and ranking for mobile queries very differently from what we do for general web search. Absolutely, the context is important, and it helps significantly.
Hi, Tim Fine at UMBC. Are there any plans to have Bing recognize and exploit semantic semi-structured data embedded in documents, perhaps in the form of microformats or RDFA?
This is an excellent question, and I'm a huge believer of semantic search. I actually give a couple of talks on semantic search there. Of course, the word semantic nowadays is a little bit, I would say, overloaded. We actually bought a company. I don't know if you know that. We actually bought the semantic search company at least 2 years ago called PowerSet. I have always been fascinated about the natural language technology. Given my research background, I just love this kind of stuff. And there's a couple of challenges there. How do we really do that? I would just say, going from the natural language technology alone, you can probably go only that far. It's just say the natural language itself is very complex. You can only go that far. The impacts on the overall search quality, I would just say no one has completely demonstrated how effective using that yet. It probably means two ways. One is actually at the query level. When you type a query, how quickly you can analyze all those interesting the words and the synonyms and all other things. The other thing is actually what is the cost if you want to index that at the document level. And I give you an example. Say that we at PowerSet did a great job, in my opinion, overall about over-indexing all the Wikipedia pages, mostly English pages. There's a few million English pages we really over-indexed. So we used more than 10 times more size to index those documents. And we still have not found the huge lift about the overall search quality. So that's really natural language alone. Then the more interesting thing is probably what you are really asking for is actually, is there some other way that we can sort of build this kind of semantic knowledge, probably most likely using the community as a whole, really build that. And maybe we start with RDF and some kind of the convention that people can agree on, then we can all overall build this thing. The challenge there is really about the incentive. How can we incent the community or those people to say, let's just take RDF as an example, say, is RDF good stuff? No, I personally think it's really great stuff. But why would any website to do this kind of things to really help to get there? The closest thing I have seen so far is that far from RDF is really the open graph that Facebook just recently came up with. To me, I would just say it's 0.1 order approximation of something interesting. Yeah.
A couple of questions. Just to continue what you're saying, with regards to RDF and such, this link open data, and there is a huge amount of data. For example, 6.4 billion triples of government data was just recently released, and my group released a couple of billions of weather data.
Right.
So, I think there is some incentive. A huge amount of all the drug database. Suppose you were doing queries about some pharmaceutical drug, and you wanted all the possible things. I think that's there enough, more than enough for such kind of things to have. So I think that that is what people are already putting in the web, on the web as open data, as well as when people have incentive to put more micro formats and things for Google and other search engines to use, right? I think there is some incentive. Right. I have asked my system admins to start putting metadata for all the stuff so that the search engine will find that. So I think that is happening where people are expressing the data. Anyway, my question was, when I see the query like, say, flight, and then you have to, from, and so on and so forth. Or when I look at something about sports, and then I know that this is baseball, and there's specific properties or attributes and so on and so forth. The question has been, I started building a similar engine in 1999, but the problem was, can I build 50 of these, 100 of these? How many models can I build?
Right.
What is your perspective, and to the extent you can describe, how do you build these models? Is it through the analysis of the data, or is it explicitly built? Should I use Wikipedia info boxes to do that? Should I seed it with some other topics? Do you limit yourself to variety of 100 different categories, travel, and so on and so forth? How do you do that part?
It's really the excellent question. I come back to the question. Let me just make a quick comment about what you said about a lot of structured data that people can actually prepare. One thing I just want to caution that is actually, even if you have structured data, doesn't mean you can leverage the structured data effectively for search engine. The reason for that is, it's really the reason the web search really worked is because people actually spend the time to make the connection between the data you have and the data already out there, or the document out there. Unless all those links happen, I don't think a lot of structure that can really be leveraged effectively. So I agree with what you said, that there are a lot of data out there, and we should take advantage. But taking advantage in terms of using search engine is still the challenge there. The second question you have is a very good one, the very technical one. It's just that you have all those categories. How did you come up with those categories? How will you do that? We take a very, very practical approach. We go segment after segment. If you look at what we do, we're very clear, and I think our competitors try to catch up with in a few of those verticals that we are ahead of. And they look at the travel. We actually go very clear about the travel. Once you go to specific segments or domains, then you actually have a chance to build some kind of ontology that is actually somewhat, we practically can still deal with it. I don't think we take an approach, to boil the ocean, to really think about, overall build the whole thing, for the entire internet yet. But we take that, the domain-specific approach, and we leverage whatever, the ODP and the other things, already out there, and typically sit with all those categories, but we continue to refine with our own data.
So you'll continue to build more and more of these categories as the time goes, and as good as you can do contextualization, you can start using those models.
So one thing I did not emphasize in this particular talk is really overall build the knowledge repository. And that's really where we go after, and the approach there is really domain by domain.
Okay. So you continue to build your knowledge, that component you're showing in the diagram.
That loop.
More and more, yeah. When I tried to do that, people didn't believe that can be done, but I was too small a company. Last question. Web ngram versus explicit entities.
Okay.
For example, in Chicago, and you have a whole bunch of what I saw was specific entities there.
Right.
And on the left-hand side, when you do Chicago, you would have all kinds of n-grams where you say Chicago and what are the things you can extend. What are the, when do you use entities versus only when you use parentheses and then explicitly then you use entities, or there's some other uses of entities versus n-grams?
I think you're really asking two questions. One is technology, the other is really user interface. So I think Kwon-san can answer this much better than me, the technology side, that maybe you can talk to him afterwards. Overall, we're struggling about saying, using this kind of statistical approach, n-gram, look at the query logs, when you type Chicago, is a lot of things we already ranked there. Then they are also at the concept level, how do we disambiguate? And the Kwon-san's demo actually showed using a print, left print, and to prompt what you need to do. All this kind of shorthand kind of stuff never really worked with consumers. No one will remember. And maybe our kids can remember. We're just too old to remember all those things. It's something that we need to do a lot of user study before we really roll this out as a Bing feature.
Just a final comment is that your competitor is a big believer into bottom-up thing. Everything can be done bottom-up. I'm very delighted to see that at least you tried to a lot more match bottom-up and top-down in a way, meaning having the models actually use. Peter Nervig had put a comment about saying that ontologies or anything knowledge is just no good for search. I had responded to that, of course I'm a small fly, but that no, it can be done if you go piece by piece by piece, because that's, on different categories. And in that context, you can model. Good to see that that's happening, and I hope,
Or maybe I'm glad you like this, and maybe I make another random comment on this. When I was a junior graduate student, one of the best PhD theses I've ever read is actually by Ronnie Brooks. If you guys follow the AI and all those things. At the end of the day, there has to be some kind of a combination of top-down and the bottom-up. There is really no magic. The more the better you can do bottom-up, it's easier for you to do top-down. The more you actually understand the top-down, it's just easier. You don't really need to do that much bottom-up. So there's really not that much magic. I would just say most of the things that worked is got to be some kind of combination.
Can you take last question?
Sure.
Yeah, I would like to know if you are working on the complex structured data like images and video, content-based image or video retrieval, or
yeah, absolutely. Which maybe should show a very quick demo about the image search. So I'm very, very proud that we have a number of content-based image search features already built in. The challenge for us is actually no one really knows it. That is really a problem. We have to really go to university to give more vision classes to just show the features. Can we just bring up the image search and the type of Van Gogh, my favorite? VAN? No, space. Yes, they figured out. You need enough strokes. Yeah, just Van Gogh. So then you have all those beautiful. If you can just move your, how about this sunflower thing? Just move over here, mouse move. Or you could do that. You could do any of them. Just mouse over here. Just stop. Yeah, you should have something popping up. Yeah. So you have two things here. One is called similar images. Two is called more sizes. If you just click more similar images, just click similar images, it will re-rank, and they take content-based thing. It will re-rank, give you beautiful stuff like this. So that is actually, clearly, it doesn't have the really understanding about this is actually house versus that. But take enough the kind of image features, and you can do that. If you go back, you can even here, you can just do another thing, the more sizes. So actually, more size, no, this one, yeah. If you click more size, it turns out that people just copy on the internet. You have all those dupes and near dupes and all those things. And one very interesting feature we found is actually people want to have the high resolution images and to use. And if they already find the image, they go find those high res images. Then we try to help the user say, look, if you really want this high res, then why don't you just go to the top of that? And sometimes you have to be careful about the image quality and all those things. There's just a couple of them, and we have actually more coming up. And I'm particularly proud of that. Is my former student actually initially did this, eventually incorporated into the product.
Okay, so similarity here is understood at the low level.
Yes.
So what about to go to the higher level?
That we have to count on those professors to give us more great technologies. I see Dan is smiling at the back. I'm sure we will someday have the right technology to really do that. One particularly interesting category is actually face. And I actually personally believe it is already, technology is already getting to a point that we might have a chance to do something very specific. But in terms of the house versus flower vase and all those things, we really haven't paid that much attention to really look at that. But I'm a huge believer of computer vision. I think the future is bright for us to really take a lot of vision technologies into image and video search. And we also have some very interesting video technology there as well in video search.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Let's thank our speakers here. Thank you.